Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to today's budget hearings for EED. We'll begin with the Maryland Office of the Inspector General for Education. And first we'll commence with an analysis from Laura Hyde.
Department of Education and received its own budget code, D73. Fiscal 2026 is the first time this agency's budget has been heard separately from MSDE. OIGE was established in Chapter 771 of 2019 and is responsible for accountability and transparency in regards to the expenditure of public funds for state education and examining and investigating matters in regards to county boards, local education agencies, public schools, non-public schools that receive state funds, MSDE, and the Interagency Commission on School Construction. Starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, OIGE's budget increases by $44,000 or 1.6% to $2.7 million in fiscal 2026. Turning to page 2, under the heading Fiscal 2024 and 2025, in fiscal 2024, MSDE was the fiscal agent for OIGE, and in OIGE's fiscal 2024 closeout, MSDE initially reported a reversion of $1.3 million in general funds, which was determined to be in error. The bold language on this page asks OIGE to discuss the reason for funds being reverted in error, the status of the reverted general funds, and any steps the agency has taken to resolve the closeout issue. Turning to page 3, Exhibit 1, overview of agency spending. In the fiscal 2026 proposed budget, OIGE's salaries and fringe benefits total $2.5 million, or 91% of the total allowance, with the remaining $233,000, or 9%, for routine operating expenses. Exhibit 2 on page 4, under the proposed budget, shows the difference between OIGE's fiscal 2025 working appropriation and the fiscal 2026 allowance. Turning to page 5, personnel, OIGE has 16 positions, which is in fiscal 2026, which is a decrease of 0.5 positions from fiscal 2025 due to the reduction of this contractual position to meet target budget requirements. Turning to the key observations section, starting on page 6, Exhibit 3 provides a summary of OIGE investigations in calendar 2024. The agency reported the completion of 4 administrative investigations, 3 audits, the issuance of 4 management alerts, which are notifications to local education agencies regarding high risk or systemic issues involving fraud or abuse that require immediate attention. Out of these 11 investigations, 3 resulted in findings with recommended actions to policies or practices, which are shown below in this chart. The bold language on page 7 asks OIGE to comment on the status of the agency recommendations and actions taken by MSDE and local education agencies to remediate these issues. Page 8 shows the DLS recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance for OIGE. In the update section on page 9 has OIGE's Managing for Results measure for calendar 2022 and 2024. Page 10 shows that OIGE's May 2024 audit did not result in any findings. This ends my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hyde, for your analysis. Are there any questions for her today? Seeing none, we're happy to move forward with Richard P. Henry, Inspector General, and team.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Harris, and members of this committee. I'm Richard Henry, and I serve as Maryland's Inspector General for Education. With me today are Deputy Inspector General Yvonne Brooks and Administrative Officer Jeannie Gunthrop. Before starting, I would like to thank Ms. Laura Hyde for her outstanding analysis of my office. I have had the opportunity to work with Ms. Hyde over the years, and she's an asset to this committee and the Office of Legislative Services. Thank you, Laura. As we begin this budget review process, I would like to point out a couple of notable achievements made by my office during this period. My office went through 2 reviews. The analysis mentioned that the Office of Legislative Audits reviewed our operational policies, budgetary practices, and case management procedures. Their audit was followed by a comprehensive peer review by the National Association of Inspectors General of our policies and procedures and our investigative and audit practices. I am proud to share with this committee that neither the OLA nor the AIG reported any negative findings or exceptions. I want this committee to be assured that the Office of the Inspector General operates as an independent, fact-based state agency and adheres to state and national standards and industry best practices in its day-to-day operations. During this reporting period, my office has seen a 62% increase in complaints received from the previous year and a 918% increase since 2020. Last year alone, my office identified over $13 million in financial mismanagement. This equates to a taxpayer's return on investment of $5.13 for every dollar spent to ensure education accountability. As mentioned in the budget analysis, my office has identified several issues involving the Maryland State Department of Education. Although I have provided this committee with detailed response of our findings, I would like to highlight the corrective action that is currently underway. MSDE has updated its guidance on child sexual abuse and sexual misconduct prevention, which will also work to provide additional training opportunities to discuss the law's requirements. MSDE will implement a compliance mechanism to ensure all LEAs staff complete mandatory training. MSDE will also amend the statewide teachers' employment history review form to include an under the penalty of perjury clause to strengthen accountability. And lastly, my office recommended that MSDE work with stakeholders to review and amend COMAR regulations to ensure language consistency and compliance with mandatory reporting requirements. I would also like to address the second concern mentioned in the analysis regarding the revision of general funds during the fiscal closeout. If you are unaware, the IG's budget has been managed through a shared service agreement with MSDE. This arrangement has caused closeout issues over the years, and both Dr. Salmons and Mr. Chaudhary has expressed concerns during their tenures. Fortunately, this year, I had the opportunity to work with Secretary Grady and explain the concerns regarding the management arrangements surrounding my budget. After discussing these concerns, Secretary Grady agreed and directed her staff to separate my budget from MSDE and create a truly independent agency. As mentioned in the analysis, MSDE reported to the Department of Budget Management that the IG would revert over $1.3 million as part of its closeout. This reversion amount was not initially shared with the IG and only found out about courtesy of another agency. Ms. Gunther and I immediately conducted an internal review and discovered that MSDE had stopped applying our payroll expenditures and that the funds were allocated to an MSDE default location. This error amounted to approximately $1.25 million, and I want to assure this committee that this error has been corrected. Regarding operational staffing, I'm happy to inform you that we do not have any operational vacancies. As mentioned earlier, our work is ever increasing, and like many other agencies, the IG has requested additional staff to meet these increases. Unfortunately, our request was denied. I can personally tell you that competing against larger state agencies isn't easy for a small independent office. As mentioned in the analysis, I will have to decrease my staffing level from 16.5 positions to 16. This change in staffing constitutes the loss of my certified public accountant. Although our work has increased, I also understand this year's budget demands on the state. With that, I'd like to thank this committee for its continued support, and my team and I are available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Great to have your team here with you today. And we just want to say thank you for what you're doing to ensure that as we are getting the resources to improve education across the state, that we have watchdogs doing their job to ensure we're doing just that. So thank you for your leadership. Are there any questions for him or his team? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And we do have one additional person signed up as a witness, Rashika Nishara. Are they here? Is that for TEDCO? I apologize. I think there's only, oh, it's in the wrong place. Okay. Because it says Inspector General. Okay, see, I can read y'all, but it wasn't like right. Okay, so that concludes the budget hearing for Inspector General for Education. Thank you so much. Moving on to the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, most often referred to as TEDCO, will begin with an analysis from Elizabeth Weibel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. TEDCO's fiscal 2026 allowance decreases about $5 million to a total of $53 million, largely due to a decrease in funding for the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund. Exhibit 1 on page 3 shows a breakdown of the allowance. 29%, or $15.5 million, goes to the Stem Cell Research Fund. 25%, or about $13 million, goes to the Social Impact Funds. And these are primarily investment funds: the Minority Pre-Seed Investment Fund, or the Builder Fund, the Inclusion Fund, and the Equitech Growth Fund, which can also issue grants and made its first round of awards in December. $14 million, or excuse me, 14%, or $7 million, goes to university research and commercialization. This includes the Maryland Innovation Initiative, as well as 2 programs that are new as of this year: the Baltimore Innovation Initiative Pilot Program and the Pava LaPere Grant Program. These programs provide investments and grants to companies that are formed at certain Maryland colleges and universities. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the proposed budget change. The Board of Public Works reduced the fiscal 25 budget for the Builder Fund by $325,000, and that is restored in the fiscal 2026 allowance. Cyber Maryland funding also decreases to the minimum mandated funding level of $99,000. And there is a legislation to move the program to the Department of Labor. And so contingent language is included in TEDCO's budget that would zero out this funding if that legislation is enacted. There's also the $5 million decrease that I mentioned for the Stem Cell Research Fund. The key observations starting on page 5 provide some additional information about the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund. Since 2007, this fund has received $242 million in total, almost all of it in general funds. And the funds roll over from year to year so that the agency can continue using them to make awards. There's no mandated funding level, and so annual funding has fluctuated a good bit over the years. The fund provides grants around stem cell research in a number of categories, as you can see in Exhibit 3 on page 7. This is a breakdown of funding by grant program over the last 5 years. You'll see that discovery grants make up 39% of the funds awarded. These go to faculty at universities or private research institutes in Maryland. Launch grants go to faculty and researchers who are new to the field and have not received MSCRF funding before. Clinical grants are for conducting clinical trials in the state. They can be awarded to companies or organizations that are based outside of Maryland, but the work being funded must take place within the state. And finally, manufacturing assistance grants are new as of fiscal 2023. These are for advancing production of stem cell therapy products, and they require a non-state funding match. Looking ahead, as the stem cell research field has matured, the fund has been able to offer a wider variety of grants. As you'll see in the exhibit, this started with grants that were purely for research and now is offering grants to support commercialization and manufacturing. The Stem Cell Research Fund statute does allow it to make both grants and loans, but so far the corporation has only done grants, largely because with the exploratory research in a relatively new field like this, you don't know if you will end up with a product that you can market, and it takes a long time to get to market if you do end up with a product, so it's very unpredictable. But as the field matures and more research products are reaching the commercialization and manufacturing stages, DLS has asked TEDCO to comment on the possibility of offering loans to some of these later stage companies, particularly if TEDCO continues to expand its manufacturing awards. In conclusion, DLS recommendation is to concur with the fiscal 26 allowance, and you can see that on page 9. That concludes my analysis, and I can take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Weibel, for your analysis. Are there any questions for her today? Seeing none, we'll move to the man with the plan and the team. I'm Troy Stovall with TEDCO. Great to see you today.
Always great to see you, Madam Chair, and thank you. Thank you to the committee members for allowing us to be here today. My name is Troy Lamel Stovall. I serve as the CEO of TEDCO. I'm here with the Executive Director from Maryland Innovation Initiative, and you will hear us talk quite a bit about our Maryland Stem Cell, the Executive Director for the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund. Again, thank you, DLS analyst. We really appreciate your support and your analysis, which we concur with, Madam Chair. We'll talk about stem cell here in a second, but I want to make sure, I want to reintroduce TEDCO, but also make a point and then pass it to my colleagues here, and I won't be long. One, for those that don't know, TEDCO is your entity that's almost a $3 billion impact. Almost $1 billion of follow-on investment, 10,000 jobs created, economic. It's a combination being economic development, venture development organization, a venture capital fund that helps to identify, support, invest, and scale early-stage technology and life science companies for the state of Maryland. When you look across the country, there are about 30 of these types of entities across the country. The challenge is in comparing us, we all do very different things, and we're even structured very differently. Our friends in Virginia, Pennsylvania are actually structured as a nonprofit. We're obviously we're part of the state. Many of them are actually strict, complete spin-outs, and they even invest in certain sectors or certain stages of that. So it's hard to compare, but there's a group out there called SSTI, which does this kind of work, looks at all these venture development organizations across the country. And they have a report, which we're more than happy we can share with you, that said when you compare what we do and all the things that we do, we're one of the best in the country. And that's just as a venture development organization. But I also told you we look like a venture capital organization. So an organization called PitchBook said TEDCO, if you look at the volume that TEDCO does, we're one of the most active entities on the East Coast and one of the most active in the country from just a venture capital point of view. We also have funds from the federal government called SSBCI, State Small Business Credit Initiative Funds. We have $50 million for that. Our CIO, Jack Miner, is here, he and his team. We do such a great job with those that we've made Maryland one of the top supporters of deployment of SSBCI dollars in the country, and we're one of the top deployers. And Jack and his team have had other states and other entities call him asking how we're doing what we're doing. But I wanted to tell you that, and we've gotten a number of awards for the work that we have done as well. I'm very proud of those awards that we've gotten. But the one I want to close with, as I turn it over to our friends from Stem Cell and MII, this past year, the NASDAQ recognized us for the work that we're doing in terms of looking at, and I'm going to use the full words, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think some of the thing that's a mistake in the atmosphere right now is that you can't add the word merit to that. And what we do at TEDCO amplifies that. When you look at the work that we do, it does not matter if you're from Western Maryland, from the Shore, from the Chesapeake, from Northeast Maryland, from Baltimore City, from the Central Maryland, from the DMV suburbs. It does not matter. What we're looking for is that merit. We're looking for that great idea, and I'll tell you what we're actually looking for. We're looking for a very good entrepreneur. We're looking for the person who may just have an okay idea. Because our job is to help coach them, as I said before, the identification, the support, moving them along that continuum so they can get investment dollars, whether that's from TEDCO or not. And so this notion that you cannot have diversity, equity, inclusion, and merit together is a false narrative that we are showing you every day we can do in TEDCO, and we do it, and we're getting the economic and the economic development returns that are required for what we do here for the state. So I thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to us. I'm here to take any questions you have. Our written testimony again in support. And let me, as I turn it over to our friends at Stem Cell, if I may start. On the $5 million, I think we've had this conversation. I think Rashika will speak to this. They do a tremendous job. If you don't know, we're one of the only 2 funds in the country with this type of investment platform. And I'm going to use the word investment. They do grants, and I know we have this debate, but to me, still investments. These are investments that we're making to bring these cures. And I've talked to many of you about the types of cures that they're doing, and one that's very personal to me is sickle cell. My sister passed away from sickle cell many years ago. I grew up seeing the ravages that sickle cell has. And so to see where we are with sickle cell because of the work that we are doing at the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund, I couldn't be more proud of. So with that, I want to introduce the Executive Director, Rashika.
Thank you, Troy. That is where I am. Well, good afternoon, Chair Smith and esteemed legislators. Thank you for your time. I stand here in front of you to discuss with you the critical importance Maryland Stem Cell Research Program has and the impact, significant impact it has had in the state. I would start by saying that in our 17 years of history, we have cultivated an ecosystem, a robust ecosystem in the state, which has enabled and transformed Maryland as a leader in regenerative medicine. We, in our 17 years of history, we have funded 600 different projects, research projects, across 41 entities, public and private. We have invested $208 million in these research projects, and that has brought significant return to the state. And let me just give you some numbers just to show the economic impact of just this program, the stem cell program. So that $208 million investment has resulted in $525 million in economic activity, $200 million in labor activity, over $19 million in local and state taxes, and over 2,000 jobs have been created. I take pride to highlight the evolution of our program with the evolving needs of the mature ecosystem in the state. We started with 2 programs, and we have now expanded to 7 programs supporting every phase of research, starting from basic research. That's how our program was started, funding academic institutions. Now we fund translational research, including clinical trials, commercialization, and manufacturing. The number of applications that we've seen in the last 2 years have increased by 60%. Because they see the support that is being provided at every stage of research and development. We have our funding to translational grants have increased by 300% in the last 2 years. The demand that we got from these applications was for $37 million, which is twice the amount of funding we have for that fiscal year 24. This is just the fiscal year 24 numbers that I'm talking about with regards to the number of applications and the funding that was requested, $37 million. We have enabled the formation of new companies in the state of Maryland. The investment that has gone to our companies have resulted, just in the last 6 years, $10 million was invested in the companies, and those companies have generated in follow-on funding $135 million, which is like 13 times return in terms of the investment state has made in these companies. 75% of those companies are still in existence. We've not only helped companies get formed. In the last few years, we've supported formation of 15 startup companies, and you'll hear from one of our startup companies from University of Maryland, Baltimore, and how they've progressed. But not only that, but we've enabled these companies to grow in the state. We provided them with the resources that have enabled them to thrive, create jobs, and emerge as strong companies. They've expanded. One notable example that I would want to present today, in addition to what you will be hearing from Dr. Winnie Zindel, is Maxite. This is a company in Montgomery County. In 2015 and 2017, we gave them an investment of total $700,000. Today, they're operating out of 67,000 square foot in facility, have generated annual revenues of $40 million, and just last month acquired a company from Massachusetts, offering and expanding their offering and increasing their revenues. The manufacturing program that was launched in 2023, thanks to your support, has empowered these companies to build their specialized manufacturing infrastructure they need to mitigate the risk of developing their products, as well as to expand their operations. TerraAdaptive, one of the companies in Frederick County, has scaled up their operations from 6,000 to 20,000 square foot, have attracted $60 million in funding from non-state sources, and have been conducting clinical trials and using manufacturing products. We have enabled public-private partnerships, and there are numerous examples. The human side of the impact is just tremendous. Troy referred to the sickle cell treatments that have cured patients. We have numerous examples of patients who have been cured. There's a recent estimate that was done that saving 100 lives translates to over $1 billion economic impact in economic value. And there are numerous examples where we have made a difference in human life, enhancing health outcomes and saving lives. So I'll stop here. I'll be more than happy to take any questions you have, and not to mention the uncertainty that is going on in the federal state. And the work that our scientists and researchers are doing takes years of skilled effort, and your support is an investment that will brighten our futures. It will improve healthcare, it will save lives, and it will strengthen our economy. So with that, I would like to introduce Vinny Zindel. He's the CEO of Secretome, a company that was spun off from University of Maryland, Baltimore, through this research we supported at the labs and now at the company. And I'll let him, and then I will introduce our patient who benefited from some of the clinical trial that we funded at University of Maryland.
Thank you, Ruchika, and thank you to the chairman, vice chair, members of the subcommittee to allow me to speak today. I'm Vinny Jindal. I'm the co-founder, president, and CEO of a company called Secretome Therapeutics. We're a Maryland-based biotechnology company that was spun out of University of Maryland, Baltimore in 2019 with offices at Camden Yards in Baltimore. This isn't part of my prepared testimony, but I also just wanted to convey to the committee, as an operator in the biotechnology field, this special moment about stem cells. The MSCRF funding isn't just about biotechnology funding in general. In the last 10 years, we've seen numerous technologies that have gestated for decades, from CRISPR-based medicine, mRNA vaccines, which some of you may have taken, immuno-oncology, CAR-T, that's saving lives, that failed for decades, and then all of a sudden became medicines that have changed the world. The first ever stem cell was approved by FDA just 2 months ago. So we are at a particular moment in time where stem cells are about to become a major field of medicine, and I think the leadership that Maryland has shown through MSCRF could really position the state very effectively for the decade to come. The MSCRF has been instrumental in supporting the advancement of what we've accomplished. With the fund support, we've achieved unique insights into the biology of stem cells, elucidated the mechanism by which they alleviate disease, and crafted true off-the-shelf products that can be distributed around the world to save lives. Furthermore, the progress that we've been able to achieve through the grants has enabled non-dilutive funding, both from investors inside the state and outside the state, to continue funding our research and development. We've now raised $23 million of investor capital, and I'm proud to say that from the first grant received by MSCRF that helped us understand the basic biology through the provision of patents, getting FDA clearance to start studies, and being able to manufacture our drug, which was in part subsidized by a grant from MSCRF, we're about to launch 2 phase 1 studies to treat forms of heart failure, which is the leading cause of death in the United States. Every dollar of the grant funding that we received from MSCRF has been spent back into research and development in Maryland. For biotech startups, early stage grant funding like we receive from MSCRF isn't just helpful, it's essential to bridge from research to development. 92% of NIH and other federal grant money is for research, not development, which creates a valley of death whereby innovations in medicine can't get the funding to go out of the lab and into companies and become the medicines that can change our lives. So I urge you to maintain, please, and expand the support for MSCRF so that companies like ours can continue developing transformative therapies, creating jobs, and contributing to Maryland's economy. Thank you again for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I would like,
Are you going to introduce each person? I just want to make sure. Good.
yeah, and now I would like to introduce Ms. Angela Freeman, who's the patient who was in one of the clinical trials from Dr. who hasn't been able to meet today. She was going to be here for testifying, but she is in the clinic doing a surgery. So I apologize for that, but her patient, Ms. Freeman, is here to tell her story of how MSCRF funding and the clinical trial she was in has supported her. Ms. Freeman.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Freeman. I am happy to say that I have had stem cells twice. The first time I had it for bone marrow. They had to give me chemo to wipe out the bone marrow that was mine, and then put the stem cells in. In doing this, I was in a hospital room for a month, but we had the best room. We could see the sunset. Going home, I had to stay in my room for a month and then slowly go out again. I can now pretty much do whatever I want. Although I don't use dirt because that can go into the lungs. The second time, I was with Dr. Sunshine, and she had asked me, would you like to be part of a study for stem cells? And I grabbed the paperwork and started signing. And she said, well, I have to explain this to you. And by the time she was done, I was done signing the paper. I said, here you go, just tell me when. So she put the stem cells in the left eye, and it was because of graft versus host, which means that the two DNAs didn't want to play together nice. So my left eye was not working at all. I couldn't see anything. So when she put the stem cells in, it didn't hurt. It was fine. And I came back 2 weeks later, and I said, I can see. And she says, well, we have to test. I said, no, I got the stem cells. I said, I can see. And she said, how? I said, I closed my right eye. And I can see letters, and I can see numbers, and I can see my grandchildren. So she did her testing and everything, and the left eye is just about where the right eye is. So I just need reading glasses now. And to cut stem cells, for the money for stem cells, I think would be completely awful to do, especially when you're talking about small children that could use it. Grade school kids, because they can only see one side of the board. Teens, because you know how some teens get picked on and because they can't see everything. And young people and parents that have children. Because, you know, with one, you absolutely need both eyes. But with two, both eyes are a necessity. So, and my second daughter moved in, and she has 4 kids. So the kids come upstairs, give us hugs and everything. And the stem cells are just making me enjoy the legacy that I and my husband will leave. And it would be a tragic mistake to cut the stem cells for research.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Freeman. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm grateful for how healthy you are and that you're able to resume the activities you love and enjoy. And I think I speak for most of us. There's nothing better than grandparents. So I'm, glad that you're here to enjoy being one. So thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Rashika. Before I turn it over to our Maryland Innovation, I want to ask our TEDCO team that are here. I want you to be able to see our TEDCO team that is here. So if they could stand and just see if they can be recognized, if they don't mind standing, please. You see a number of our folks from our MI, our marketing, our venture development, our chief investment officer, and other folks from the MI team and the stem cell team, and our government relations team. So thank you all. Great work that they do. We're a small but mighty team that brings that impact.
I mentioned TEDCO has showed out. I don't think anyone has been this complete in bringing their team in. So I want to salute all the TEDCO family. Congrats and thank you.
And I want to also call you out, Madam Chair, for your support of TEDCO and being at our expo back in December. We thank you for your support of that. We had more than 1,000 folks there at the event, and we still continue to get social media postings about it. I mentioned that we have ways in which we bring these early stage technology life science to market. One of those is the federal labs. We help in facilitation of bringing tech commercialization. One of those is just the garage. That entrepreneur that's in the garage. But one of the most important ones are academic institutions. And so I want to introduce the Executive Director of the Maryland Innovation Initiative to talk about that effort and his guest.
Great. Thank you, Troy, and thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for your time today. So my name is Abhishek, or Abhi Kulshrestha. I've served as the Executive Director for the Maryland Innovation Initiative since July of last year. I'm a scientist by training. I've had the pleasure of working most of my career in the space of innovation-driven economic development. So thinking about how we can use technology that emanates from folks' garages, from federal labs, from universities, to create race to the top competitive regional economies. And have gotten to do that in various places around the United States. And I'll say as I've asked folks for best practices in university to commercial translation, a lot of fingers pointed back this way to Maryland. So it's a particular honor for me to have been able to join this team in July and take on the legacy of the Maryland Innovation Initiative. Since we were founded by statute in 2012, we've deployed over $60 million in both grant and investment funding toward universities and startups as they think about bringing critical technologies to the market. And so our investment ranges broadly try to align with the state's economic development priorities. We've invested in everything from telehealth platforms to enhance health equity and healthcare access, to jet propulsion systems that support the American warfighter, to, as you'll hear from Ms. Bailey Surtees today, innovations in animal healthcare technology so that we can make sure that our friends at home live as long and as happily as possible. The impact of the technologies that we create is nationwide, in fact, global. But the economic impact is substantial here in Maryland. We, from the $60 million that we have invested or awarded since 2012, $10 in private funding for every dollar that we spend follows, and $3 in federal funding. So a 13 times return on the investment for the taxpayer in Maryland. We have seen a near doubling in qualified applications reaching our program in the last 2 years, which means that we've gone from being able to fund about 60% of qualified technologies that we see to a projected 35% this year, which is a real testament to just the growth of innovation and translation among our partner institutions. Lastly, I'll mention, because of the support of this body and the state of Maryland, we've been able to expand our program to think about how we encourage and facilitate economic development and commercialization throughout the state. So while we started in 2012 with just 5 partner institutions, Morgan State University, Johns Hopkins, Baltimore, BC, and College Park, in 2023, we had the opportunity to expand our program to include Frostburg State and Bowie State Universities, to think about how we support innovation and economic development at emergent research institutions. We were able to run that pilot program for 2 years, and despite the fact that the funding for the program has lapsed, we continue to work with our colleagues at Frostburg State and Bowie State to think through how they can build lasting infrastructure that supports commercialization in their regions. Finally, I'll mention that we're excited this year, again, because of the support of the state of Maryland, to launch a new program that, again, will expand the Maryland Innovation Initiative model to Baltimore, building on the success of the Baltimore Tech Hubs initiative. Through the Baltimore Innovation Initiative, which is led by Mr. Lacio Lewis, the newest member of our team, we will be able to expand our support for entrepreneurship and commercialization to all 20 public and private universities, colleges, and community colleges in the Baltimore, Columbia, Towson MSA. So we are incredibly excited about the progress that we've made. We're incredibly excited to continue to make progress to grow jobs in the state. Our investments have yielded over 400 sustained jobs, and almost about 10 of them, I believe, sit with Ms. Bailey Surtees here. So I'm excited to introduce her so that she can talk about her company and the impact of our program. Excuse me.
Hi all, thank you for being here, or thank you for having me here, and for being here. My name is Bailey Surtees. I'm the CEO of Kubanda Cryotherapy. Kubanda was founded while completing my undergraduate studies at Johns Hopkins almost a decade ago, and it was because of funding from MII that we were able to first develop the technology within Johns Hopkins and then spin out and commercialize the technology. Now, what we do is we have cryotherapy for underserved tumor markets. For us, this means pets. So 1 in 4 pets develops a tumor in their lifetime, yet fewer than 5% of these are treated. And that's because the medicine and animal health lags starkly behind human health. So we developed technology to allow the translation of cryotherapy, or the use of extreme cold, to freeze and kill unwanted tissue in a really controlled way. So that technology has now been commercialized. We have clinics using it throughout North America and are well represented in veterinary universities as well. And MII was a huge part of that, of getting us that start, of making it so that we could form an actual company and develop the technology to the point that it's at today. It also was instrumental to us deciding to stay in Baltimore and to grow our company here and hire here. There are a lot of different places folks go after graduation when thinking about starting a company, but knowing that the support of the biotechnology infrastructure in Maryland and programs like this are really what drew us to staying here. So with that, I would just like to express my gratitude to the subcommittee and the state for their continued support of Maryland Innovation Initiative and the important work that they're doing for our biotechnology sector here in Maryland.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for the work you're doing. I'm a big pet lover, and I think, that's the thing about loving pets. We always know that we'll eventually have to say goodbye, and if we don't have to say goodbye as quickly, that would be wonderful. So thank you for the advances that you've been behind. I believe those are all the witnesses that I've seen that were signed up for oral testimony. Correct. Are there any questions for the panel? Delegate Forbes and then Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for your testimony today. Dr. Najera, thank you for your passion for your stem cell research fund, and Ms. Freeman for sharing your story with us. I won't forget it, so thank you. Director Stovall, your portfolio is wide. You're investing in lots of things. How do you report back to the public how those investments do, and where can they find that information?
No, thank you. Thank you for that question, Madam. So at a bunch of different levels. So every quarter, we have to submit a quarterly report on the job creations that we're doing in the state. Every year, we submit a yearly report that talks about that job creation as well as impact. Every other year, the state does an audit of our findings. And so all those documents are on both our website as well as on the various state entities that we have to report this information to.
Thank you. I appreciate that information.
And I forgot, I don't know why I didn't say this. We also, through the efforts of Ms. Thomas and her development and marketing team, we produce an annual report, which is also on our website as well. And actually, both of these entities also produce annual reports.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So appreciate you all. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate the stories and appreciate all the work that you all are doing. We want to piggyback on Delegate Forbes' question. So obviously, TECO do a lot of great work. And so the companies that are denied, right, that don't get any funding, how do you all respond back to them in the sense of, hey, these are the things that you probably could done better? And then are there any appeal ways they can appeal the decisions?
Yeah. So let me start with some numbers and then come to your question. So as I said, TECO is this, I think there's all kinds of different adjectives. One of the adjectives has been a platypus. We're this, remember I told you, we're an economic development entity, a venture development entity, and a venture capital entity. So I'm going to use some stats from the venture capital space, if I may. So in the venture capital space, 2% of all applications at a traditional venture capital organization get approved for investing. 2% at a traditional venture capital organization. At TEDCO, it's almost 30%. And we're actually at a record number of volume in terms of applications. And we've got a fund, we have 3 funds. And again, Jack Miner is our Chief Investment Officer, CIO, and he's got a fund manager for each of those funds. We have a social impact fund, which is vested at very early stage, that idea in the garage, if you will. And we're writing checks anywhere from about $150,000 up to about $500,000. And within that social impact is a builder fund that I know you guys have been very supportive of. Then we have our seed funds, and then we have our venture funds. And so, yes, and so I see Graham Dodge is here. So Graham runs what we call our venture development organization. And part of Graham's job, working with Jack's team, is to help them get venture ready. That's what we call it, to get them with that idea. And I said that we look for great people with okay ideas, because we want to make that great person have a great idea. But that takes coaching. That takes the ability to coach. And I will tell you, Delegate, one of the first questions I ask is the coachability. Are they willing to listen? Are they willing to take guidance? Because we're taking them at a really, really early stage and taking on a lot of risk with that. And these are taxpayer dollars that are at risk. And so, yes, we try to, part of the, and I won't sit and tell you that we're perfect, because we're not. But we have a very good tracking mechanism that I can go in right now called Salesforce. I can go in and track all the communications that we're having with these companies. And I'm able to see the communications that's going on back and forth with those companies, as whether that's an email or a phone call. And yes, part of the conversation we want to have is not no, and that's it. It's not a no and a period. It's a no and a comma. It's a no and a comma, and then fill in the blank on the comma depending on what they may or may not be able to do. Or we may not be the right entity for them. It could be any number of reasons. We may not be the right entity. They may not hit the types of things that we're looking for. They might not be at a stage that's even at the early stage they're even ready for us, which is why actually we created a thing called concept capital. We're putting $25,000 to play, because some of these ideas just aren't ready for investment. They're not just investment ready. We might send them to some of our partners in the ecosystem, some of our maker spaces, the other place that we actually do fund as well. So there's a variety of answers that go into that. But I will say, look, I've started 2 or 3 other venture capital organizations in this country, traditional venture capital. And I will say, look, one, no venture capitalist gets it right 100% of the time. That's just not. That's not reasonable or feasible. And the ones we get right, we expect 10% of the portfolio, 10% of the portfolio to actually make the returns to support the rest of the portfolio. So for the ability, given the volume that we do and the returns that we get, we're actually pretty good given the risks that we have to take on. Those risks are, we can't invest outside the state of Maryland. We're limited to certain places. We cannot not say no to certain technologies. In other words, we might be over-indexed to a technology, but we can't say no if we think it's a good idea. We can't say no just because we're over-indexed. So there's a lot of risks that we take on. And if you actually do the math from a risk-adjusted return point of view, given our returns, we're one of the best in the country from a venture capital point of view. So that was a long-winded answer to your question. I apologize for that. But the answer is no and a comma, based on what we are observing and where they are in that process. I hope that answers your question.
May I add a comment to the directors? This may categorize me as one of the just okay people that the director mentioned, but we're representative of exactly what the director said. We applied 2 years ago for support for GMP manufacturing, which means manufacturing of our drug that makes it appropriate to infuse into humans, and we were denied. We got comments back from the expert committee saying, you're not ready. You need to do X, Y, and Z, which was very instructive for us, actually. So we went about in the 12 months after that, implementing X, Y, and Z, applied again, and then got the funding. So that rejection mechanism actually can be an instructive set of guidance that makes what we do better.
And on that point, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Mr. Miner can correct me, but I want to say the average investment that we make has been rejected at least once. Yeah.
Delegate Wolick.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the presentation. Appreciate the overview in terms of what you've been working on. And we've had offline conversations, and you know of my interest in the space. I have two questions. One is in terms of the sort of how you're measuring success. Part of what you were saying is, the dollars that you're investing being matched by other private sector dollars. Somebody mentioned 400 jobs that have been sustained jobs throughout the history of the organization. I'm curious because we are dealing with budgetary issues here. How are you categorizing success when it comes to paying into sort of the tax pool?
Yep.
The businesses that have been stood up, how much revenue has the state seen from those entities?
Yep.
What does that really look like?
Yeah, and I could get my numbers right, but I want to say, so almost $200 million in tax revenues. Yeah, almost $200 million of tax revenues that have come back, and we can get you the actual, we actually just recently did, but last year we did an economic impact report. That's what I'm getting my almost $3 billion from. So if you look at that, almost $3 billion of economic impact, and we actually do know, Madam Delegate, that number is understated. We actually, there's some analytics that we've got to get better on our data side to better state that number. I mentioned earlier that we know we've created over 10,000 jobs. That includes the numbers that you heard from our friends at MI and Stem Cell. Over 10,000 jobs have been created through the investments that you provided to us. And we also know $1 billion of investment. And I recognize that the jobs and state income tax dollars are important. I don't disagree with that metric. But I would tell you that also understanding the capital that comes into the state. You heard that from both from MI. The capital that comes to the state, but for would not come into the state if not for the investments that we're making through our different TEDCO entities. I think it's an important metric also that should also be talked about. And for us, it's $1 billion.
So just as for clarity's sake, the $200 million that you mentioned is annually or over the course of?
Over the course of time.
Over the course of time, 200 in tax has come back to the state from the entities you funded?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. My follow-on question is just something I've been noodling on, which is obviously the fact that our state's economy, unfortunately, is stagnant. It's not growing, also compared to our neighboring states. I just wonder what TEDCO's perspective is on sort of the problem we find ourselves in, and frankly have been in for a number of years. Our economy has been sort of flatlined. So what role do you see first TEDCO playing, but then also what is your theory of why we are where we are? Because frankly, we need to sort of jumpstart our economy, and I'd love to hear the perspective of your group on that.
So through the support of this entity, of the legislative body, several years ago, you asked us to go and do a study to answer that exact question. And that became the Equitech, that led to the Equitech Growth Commission and Fund that you're funding. And that study said a number of things. And so I probably won't get them all correct, but one of the things it talked about was this lack of growth. And if you looked at the differential between where we were, and just to get to the average, not to best in class, but to average was 90,000 jobs that we were missing out on. And many of those jobs were in a manufacturing sector that we were, and again, we do a great job, particularly because of the work that these two individuals and the organizations do. We do a great job of getting those ideas, innovation of those ideas, bringing them to market. But what we don't do sometimes, many times, is we don't manufacture them. And that manufacturing, particularly in our life science space, those manufacturing entities are going to North Carolina. They're going to a Tennessee. They're not staying here. And so that is one area that we've got to do better. But if you remember, the name of the study was Equitech. And so part of what it also said was that we've got to do a better job, back to my earlier point about making sure that everyone has a chance. Everyone is at the table. And it talked about some amazing statistics that if we keep going at the pace we are, how many years, in some cases decades, if not even a centuries, it's going to take to get to some type of equitable areas in terms of science and technology, in terms of gender and race in certain sectors. And so, again, through your efforts, you've provided the Equitech Growth Fund. We have $5 million. So back at the Expo, back in December, through the efforts of Graham Dodge and some other folks who aren't here, Stephen and Karen, who are not here, we announced 14 awards around with $7 million that was funded that allowed us to look at manufacturing, look at infrastructure. How do we think differently about the infrastructure? But also, how do we think about the workforce side of this? Because you got to have people ready for those jobs. You got to have a place for them to go to. And if you look at the impact that that $7 million is going to have, it's talking about 2,000 jobs. And so we believe that, just think about that, just with $7 million, we could create an impact of 2,000 jobs with $7 million. What can we do with 70 million? You know, what can we do with 700 million? And so there is a scale function here. And so to answer your question about TEDCO, we believe we're playing our important part. I get the part that, you know, you got to get those big companies to come here. Next generation of companies that are in our labs or sitting on a university campus. How do we turn research that's happening around this cell? But how do we make sure that we just don't create that cure, but we're manufacturing that cure here? Because that's how you create those long-term jobs. Because it's not just the scientists, we need the manufacturers too. So I think there has to be a holistic approach to this. Yes, clearly I would prefer that we not take this $5 million cut in stem cell. Because one of the challenges is going to be part of the money they were using that $5 million for was for manufacturing. And so there is this, I get the whole, I get $3 billion and growing, I get all those numbers, and those are huge numbers, I get it. We're $60 million as a total entity, so we're as I like to say, a rounding error of a rounding error. But we punch way above our weight class. I just told you, with that $60 million, which has been fairly steady over the years, we've had almost $3 billion of economic impact to you. Almost $200 million of revenue, 10,000 jobs. So we're punching way above our weight class, and when you compare us to other states across the country, we're best in class without even a question mark about it. So I hope, Delegate, that answered your question. And I welcome any comments from my colleagues.
If I can.
Yeah.
So just, Delegate, I just wanted to also add, in terms of the industry we are working in, the stem cell and regenerative medicine, it requires years and years of development and very skilled workforce and very skilled research expertise. So when you look at California, where they have similar state support, their clinical trial grant is $15 million. Our clinical grant is $1 million with the matching requirement as well. So if we want to, this is a capital-intensive industry, and it brings transformative cures. If we really want to do something different, we need to make sure that we are giving enough support to our companies and to our researchers so that they can take these discoveries from bench to bedside.
Did you want to add anything?
No.
That answer your question, Delegate?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the panel today? Seeing none, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you, Ms. Freeman, for taking the time to be with us today and give us that picture of what all this work is about, making people's lives better. So thank you so much for being here.
It's very, very.
And our furry friends' lives better, too. I don't want to leave them out. All right.
It's so important.
Absolutely. There are no other witnesses, and that concludes the budget hearing for TEDCO and all the budget